Hello, this recording is to help you understand the cell cycle for 7th grade science. So, the cell cycle, depending on which book you look in, it either has 2 or 3 parts. And the main part, first of all, it's a cycle, which means it's continuously happening. So you start over here with the cell, and here's our cell membrane, there's our nuclear envelope, and this is chromatin. Remember that DNA, if it gets wound up, it can turn into chromatin, and that is what's in the nucleus. Now, the cell cycle has this beginning part, and this is called interphase. And interphase, two things happen. One, the cell grows, and it might spend half the time growing. And then the other thing that happens is the DNA gets replicated or copied. And that might take place from here to, let's say, about here. So that's interphase. This next part over here is when something happens called mitosis. And mitosis is something you end up spending a lot of time studying and learning about in science class, but a lot of people don't understand the big idea. I guess the big idea of interphase is the cell grows and it makes a copy of its own DNA. The big idea in mitosis is that before the cell divides in two, one copy of the DNA goes into each new cell. And that way each new cell has the full instructions so that it can make proteins and do everything it needs to do. So let's take a look at mitosis. And mitosis really takes, let's clear all this. Mitosis has 4 phases. So you remember, we're coming from interphase and now we're going into mitosis. So the first phase, this is called prophase. Fancy name. And what happens, you still have the nuclear envelope, but the chromatin starts winding up more. It winds around these proteins, and as it winds up more to get more organized, it takes on these little shapes called chromosomes. So you have the chromosomes appearing. And a lot of people talk about chromosomes as if they're always there, and technically they are because they're made of DNA, but you can't always see them unless the cell is in mitosis. So prophase, that winds, all the chromatin or DNA winds up and turns into chromosomes. And then the cell progresses into the next phase called metaphase. And during metaphase, the chromosomes line up in the middle. So you have these chromosomes, the nuclear envelope dissolves, and you have these little chromosomes lining up in the middle. Ideally you have one on one side and the copied one is on the other, and you can see these little chromosomes lined up. Then the cell progresses into the next part of mitosis, and that's anaphase. And during anaphase, the chromosomes, the little halves, move apart. Or another way to think of it is they move away from the middle. So you have those little ones moving to opposite parts of the cell. So the chromosomes that were lined up in the middle, now they're splitting, and you have one copy going one way, one copy going the other. So things are going that way, things are going that way. And then the last part of mitosis is when the cell starts to kind of start pulling apart. And this is telophase. I remember this because what's happening is the nuclear membrane's reforming. You can kind of see it. It's still a little squiggly, so you don't really have chromosomes. They're unwinding back into chromatin or chromatin, depending on how you pronounce it. I've heard both ways. I'm probably saying it the wrong way. But what happens is you're starting to form 2 cells. So you almost have 2 cells. If you turn this on its side, it looks like an old-fashioned telephone. And I know that word sounds kind of weird, but if it's looking like a telephone, old-fashioned telephone receiver, you're in telophase. So you've got prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. The chromosomes appear, they line up in the middle, they start moving apart, and then you start having this. And let's go back to our cell cycle. So you start out with one cell here. Remember, it's going through interphase. Then about over here somewhere, let's say you have mitosis. And then right here, when you have the two cells splitting apart, one going that way and one is just going to go right back into the cell cycle. When they split apart, right when they split, that is called cytokinesis. And the cell membranes kind of pinch in, separate all the organelles, and you have two new cells, and the new cells are called daughter cells. And then it starts over. With each new daughter cell, they go into interphase. Remember, they grow for a good chunk. Let's just say they grow until about this part. And then the second part is, once again, that one set of DNA gets replicated or copied. And that takes place, till about right here. And then once again, they go into mitosis. The chromatin winds up into chromosomes during prophase. Then they line up in the middle for metaphase. Let me write those letters out. Then the one copy goes to each side for anaphase, and then it starts to reform two cells. It looks like an old-fashioned telephone receiver in telophase, and then it goes through cytokinesis, and it just keeps going and going and going. And that is the basics of the cell cycle for 7th grade science.